Today, we turn our attention to the balance of the working life and the creative life. Many successful writers divide their time and focus between daily occupations and tasks and creative writing. And we wondered how they find the energy, enthusiasm, or even a sense of balance that's necessary to succeed at a job or at making sure that the necessities of life are covered while also developing a creative craft. And we wondered whether or not the two sides, that workaday life and that creative life, actually serve to support and complement each other or hinder each other. We're proud to present our guests today, Annecy Báez, Rawi Hage, Saïd Sayrafiezadeh, and David Dante Troutt. They're going to be considering for us how our writing life can be influenced, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst, by a career outside the literary arena. They're going to be covering a variety of questions today, starting out with a sense or definition of what is work and how their understanding of work diverges from those of their mentors, of their communities, of their families, of the people who have influenced their understanding of how work happens and how we are as workers in it. They're going to share with us anecdotes about their first jobs, about their favorite jobs, and separately, the jobs that may not have been the best, but which taught them the most. They'll share with us how they began writing professionally, that start and its evolution. And they'll talk about the balance of life outside of work and how that informs the way in which they grow as artists. Here are the biographies. David Dante Troutt was raised on the border of Harlem and Washington Heights, and he's been writing creatively for most of his life: poetry, novels, nonfiction, and journalism. He's a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School, and he is a professor at Rutgers Law School, pursuing various law advocacy-related efforts in both inner-city poverty and intellectual property. As a writer, a scholar, and an activist, Trout's work addresses themes involving cities, racial identity, and the quest for equity. He's the author of a short story collection, The Monkey Suit, and the novel, The Importance of Being Dangerous. He also edited and contributed to the collection of essays entitled After the Storm, Black Intellectuals Explore the Meaning of Hurricane Katrina. Annecy Báez was born in the Dominican Republic and came to the United States when she was 3. She was raised in New York and currently lives in Westchester. She is a poet and fiction writer, and her literary work has appeared in Caudal, a Dominican journal, Tertuliando, Hanging Out, a bilingual anthology, and Callaloo. She's a psychotherapist by training and holds a doctoral degree in clinical social work. And she is presently the director of counseling at the Counseling Center at Lehman College. Rawi Hage was born in Beirut and lived through 9 years of Lebanese civil war. He is a writer, a visual artist, and a curator, and he lives in Montreal. First published in Canada, his novel, Demir's Game, was a finalist for the nation's top literary prizes, the Scotiabank Giller Prize and the Governor General's Literary Award, as well as the Writers' Trust Award and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. And he won the MacArthur First Book Prize and the Paragraph Hugh McLellan Prize for Fiction. And we welcome Saïd Sayrafiezadeh, who was born in Brooklyn to a Jewish-American mother and an Iranian father, and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. His short stories and essays have appeared in The New Yorker, The Paris Review, Granta, New York Times Book Review, and other publications. His critically acclaimed memoir, When Skateboards Will Be Free, was selected as one of the 10 best books of 2009 by the New York Times. He's a New Yorker. We'll be starting off with David, sharing a little of his perspectives on himself as writer and as worker.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Is that too loud? Should I pull this back a little bit? Thank you so much for inviting me, Stacy, to this event and for that very kind introduction. I guess I was thinking about reading a little bit from my novel, but I've decided I'm not going to read today. I'll just begin with a few more words about myself and about this life-work balance, which also includes a real dedication to a craft that's a great passion of mine. I realized that 3 books later and lots of unpublished work later that I was really never going to be what I became. I had never planned to be a law professor. I had never planned to become a lawyer. And in fact, the only thing I felt pretty certain about as a kid was that I was going to be a writer. And that was just one of those unmistakable urges in me that came out in journals and poems and, little things that I just had for some reason to write down. And I did, and eventually I started to feel pretty good about it. But not as good as I felt about, like, architecture. I thought I was going to be an architect because I used to read lots of House Beautiful magazines with my mom, and I used to imagine living in some fabulous mansion in Westchester that I would design all by myself. And then I discovered that there's a lot of math in architecture, and that I wasn't very good at math. So I decided I was not going to be an architect. But I was a really good basketball player. And at that time, the New York Knicks were actually a very good team. You probably have no idea what that experience is like. But back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Knicks were actually champions, and people like Walt Frazier were not announcers. They were star point guards, and I was going to replace him. And then I discovered that I wasn't actually that good at basketball. And so I went on to other loves. And I thought maybe I would be a psychologist because my mother had developed a real love for psychology and eventually became a psychologist. And I greatly admired my mother, who was a huge influence in my life in all things. And I thought I would do that, and I continued along the way to write, and I went on to college, and I even studied psychology, and I also studied creative writing. And I discovered really 2 things. I discovered that I loved writing no matter how I wrote. I loved writing poetry. I loved writing stories. I loved trying to think about novels. I loved trying to muscle through a novel. A novel takes so much time. You really have to live with it like a person. It's just, and then you have to go back and revise it, and you realize you're thinking about the novel all the time. It just comes into conversation, and you realize, oh wait, let me just jot that down. So I loved that. I loved journalism. I loved feeling like I had something valuable to say and sensing that I knew a way to say it, or at least that I was going to struggle to do that. So I eventually gave up psychology, but I continued writing, and I continued with a sense that I had some strongly held beliefs about things. And that is eventually what got me to law school, that on the power of my beliefs about changing the world, that I wanted to do that too. I wanted to write, and I wanted to change the world. And law became the way that I thought I could do it. And eventually, after practicing law for a while, people said to me, you're a writer. Have you ever thought about being a law professor? Law professors have strong views of things, but they also get paid to write. So I thought, paid to write? Are you kidding? That might be the ticket. Plus, I wasn't enjoying being a lawyer so much. And so I ultimately, I like to say, I backed into becoming a law professor. And I've really enjoyed it. I love teaching students. I love the interaction between students and teacher. I like the struggle. I like the sense of what work means every day. But most importantly, I do love to be paid to write. And that's really my story to this date. And when we have more time and questions, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that trying to balance these 2 things can mean. Thanks.
Thank you. It's, I guess it's my turn, right? She's giving me the finger. It's good to be here. Well, not too many people maybe know, but I lived in the city for 8 years. When I first left Lebanon during the war in 1984, I arrived here, and my first residency was in Flatbush, and I worked. I also did, maybe I'm jumping to the second question, because it says describe your first job. My first job was on Church Avenue. or somewhere around church. So this is kind of home to me, and it's good to be here again. I grew up in Lebanon when the war started. I was 9 years old. My father had a store. He sold women's clothing, but I was fortunate enough to have a father who was always a reader. He read all the time, which was not a very profitable thing to do when you're running a business. And if it wasn't for my mother, who would come a few hours a day and outsell my father, I think we would have starved. But nevertheless, I think my father always surrounded us with books. He was a great admirer of Arabic literature and French literature, because Lebanon at one point was a French colony, and my father had the chance to be educated by French priests. So I grew up in that atmosphere of reading, but I hated school. I was one of those guys who sat in the back and never listened. But when we went home, me and my brothers, we always read. I think reading is essential for writing. And I drifted for a long time. I drifted in New York, being stranded really, not being able to go back, and not having the proper paper to stay. My immigration papers ran out and I had to leave, and Lebanon was in the midst of the war, so I decided to move to Canada, and I was fortunate enough to be accepted as an immigrant and finally as a citizen. When I arrived to Canada, I studied photography, and that's where I got my education. Canada does have something which I admire. It is kind of a socialist place, where at least it used to be, where everybody had a right for an education, and when I arrived, it was almost for free. So I was fortunate to be able to get a degree in photography, and through my studies of critical theories and arts, I moved on to literature and eventually to writing. I'll speak a bit more about my life. It's a bit longer than that, but when I won the big award, this first thing I did is I went to my father and I told him that it's because of him I became a writer. I think he had a dream. He always had a dream. Because he had 4 kids, he was stuck in this store for most of his life. But I think I watched my father doing something that he never wanted to do, and I eventually tried all my life not to be stuck into something I didn't want to do. I did follow a dream at a big risk and a big cost, that's for sure. But somehow I was fortunate to become what I wanted to be. Here, I hope that she's giving me one. I don't know if that means number 1 or 1 minute. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Do you hear me? Is that good? Well, welcome and thank you for being here. And I want to thank Penn and Stacy for organizing this event and inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. When I think about work and I think about my writing, I was the kind of person who loved reading. I really did. And back then, there was no Barnes & Noble, so you would go to an old store, and for some reason, the books smelled like withered roses, and I actually smell them. I loved books. I collected them. I love having them. I love getting into the story and going into a different world, and so I always loved reading. I wondered how people made the books. Like, how did they do it? But I never thought I could be one of those people for a very long time, even though I loved writing. I mean, I loved reading. And what I would do, too, which just came from me, I used to just love to write in my journal. I felt that the world was filled with interesting things, and I wanted to collect them, just like I collected books. So I would write stories and just keep track of things people told me. I don't know why I did that. I just did that. But as you know, I'm Dominican, so I came from the Dominican Republic during the end of the dictatorship, and my family came because of that. And we settled in the South Bronx, so I was raised in the Bronx. I don't know if anybody is from the Bronx. But when I was in the Bronx back then, my whole building was filled with elderly women who were Holocaust survivors. And they weren't all Jewish. Some of them were Christian who had helped the Jews during that time. And so they had been in a camp. And they would tell me stories, a lot of stories, and I used to find that very interesting. And it was, then I was in high school in the Bronx, and my teachers were all Jewish with parents who were survivors. And I remember I was in an honor literature class learning a lot about Jewish literature. And I was also in the Spanish literature class learning about Spanish literature. So those were the two beginnings for me, Jewish literature and Spanish literature, that continued to just make me love reading and writing. But when I was 15, my family went back to the Dominican Republic because now supposedly things were okay and we could go back, and Dominicans love Dominican Republic, so we went back for a little bit. And I was in an American Catholic high school there. And Dominican Republic, like many Latin countries, they love poetry and reading, and my whole world was in Dominican Republic around literature, and not only Dominican literature, but all kinds of literature. We were surrounded by poetry, and I remember entering a contest for my class, and I wrote a story, and then I told my dad that I wanted to write more. And back then, you know, fathers were afraid that you would become a journalist because journalists were the first ones to die. Journalists die all the time in Dominican Republic. And so my father didn't want me to be a writer because that's the only thing he imagined, that I'd be a journalist and end up dead or something. And
I'm sorry, why did they die?
well, back then they were against the government, so they would write a lot of things about, you know, things that were happening, and if they said the truth, they would eventually end up dead. So my father was very conscientious, and my father did work for the government. So I had a very privileged little life where I was protected, and I didn't realize how dangerous things were. So, but I started writing then and started to want to write more. And my dad said, why don't you just go to college, get an education, and later on you could think about writing. He says, because you want to have a job that can support your writing. And I really believed that. So I did that. I said, okay, I'll go to college. And I was interested in psychology because my readings taught me about people. And I wanted to know why people did the things they do. And I'm sure many of you wonder, why does she do that? Why does he do that? And when I read a story, it kind of gave me an idea of why people did what they did. But I wanted more. So I majored in psychology, and then I went to get my master's in social work, and then I went to get my PhD in social work because I wanted to be a therapist that knew a lot, you know. And so after I finished my dissertation, which was like 250 pages, I said, if I could do that, I could write my book, you know? And that really was the beginning for me to realize that I could, and I was journaling and doing all that other stuff and reading poetry and writing poetry, but I wasn't taking it to this level. When I finished the dissertation, that really said to me, you could do it. It was like if I had done what my father said for me to do, and now I had permission somewhere in my head that I could write. So I started to write. And what I did was I found a writer's group that I could write with them because I didn't have like an MFA. People go to get their master's now in writing. I taught myself to write by reading. And then I wanted a community of people that could read and write with me. And so I joined a women's group. And then later on, my group was not very diverse. And I wanted to hear the voices of African American women and men and Latino women and men. So then I joined a writer's group at Frederick Douglass. It's on 98th Street. And there I met a lot of other Dominican literary friends that have novels now out. And that was the beginning for me of really writing, and I wrote all those stories during all that time, the stories that eventually became this book. Now, at the time when I was trying to put this collection together, I was a professor at New York University teaching graduate school. And I thought going to teach graduate school was going to be easy because I was going to have the summers off. But when you're a psychotherapist at NYU, you do not have the summers off. You have to write to make money for the college. And you have to write grants that bring in money for the college to do research. So here I became a researcher, and I was writing all these professional articles and on the side at midnight I was writing this book, while I was writing. So if you Google me, you'll see sometimes people find my professional work and say, oh, do you know there's this other woman that has your name that writes stories? And I'm like, really? That's just me, because people can't imagine that I could be a professor, that I could write, and that I could do this and that. So that's how I came to this book. It took me a while to put these stories together. I'll share a little bit later as we are asking questions, but this is 14 stories about Latina girls in the Bronx. They're all related. They live in the same building, as many Dominican families do. And I'll share a little bit more of how I put it together, okay?
Hi, everybody. Too loud? Am I too loud? No, I'm just right. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sharing the stage. It's nice to be here with you guys. I got 3 questions for you. Show of hands, who has now or ever has had a day job? A job? Some job. Okay. All right, that one popped up in the bed. What was my second question on that? Who has worked in a supermarket? Supermarkets? Okay, 3rd question. Anybody know what double bagging is? What's double bagging? What's that? 2 bags, right. So when I was your age, I was a bagger in a supermarket, and you weren't allowed to double bag. And I did it anyway, because I didn't want the customers' bags to break. I was conscientious. So I'm going to read you a short passage. This is a true story. This is from my book, my memoir, so here's a short passage. That Friday night, Al caught me double bagging. "Come with me," he said. On the way to the back room, we stopped at the customer service window where he announced loudly, "I'm going into the back room with Saïd. I'm thinking about firing him." In the back room, he asked me, "Why are you double bagging?" He asked it like he was just curious. "I don't know, sir," I said. I didn't look at his face, I looked at his tie. "Do you know how much paper bags cost?" "No, sir," I said. "Take a guess." 25 cents, sir. They cost 1 cent each. How much would it cost if every bagger double bagged all day, every day? He made it sound like it was a number I should know. "I don't know," I said. "Do you think it would add up to a lot?" "Yes, sir." "I'm thinking about firing you," he said. "Yes, sir." "What would your parents say if I fired you?" Okay. So that's my experience working in a supermarket. And now I know for those of you who've had a job, and especially those who've worked in a supermarket, you've had some humiliating experience. And for those of you who don't have a job yet, your experiences will come. And the great thing about writing, and I didn't know this when I was 16 and Al was thinking about firing me. By the way, he didn't fire me. But the great thing about writing is that then you can use those bad experience, I'm not just talking about work experiences, I'm talking about all sorts of experiences, you can use them and you can turn them into something. And you can tell your story, and in a way you can stop being haunted by those experiences. There's a list of questions that we're going to go through, and the first one, it's a two-part question. It's A, what is your definition of work? And B, how do you see work as opposed to your parents' understanding of work? I have one more question. Anybody can get this question right, you get an A+ for the year. Does anybody here know what the word amanuensis means? Amanuensis. Somewhere. Okay. No A pluses? Nobody wants it? All right. And you can't look it up you can't Google it right now. It means secretary. And when my mother was a little girl, she got a typewriter, and she loved typing on it. And her dad said, when you grow up, you're going to be an amanuensis, meaning you're going to be a secretary. And my mom wanted to be a writer. And guess what my mom became? No, see, now you get a C-. She said, the question, what did my mom become? She said writer. Okay, so you get C-. All right, anybody else want to guess? Okay, all right, now I give you an A. She became a secretary. I grew up with my mom. I didn't grow up with my father. My father left home when I was a baby. I didn't know my father. But my experience was watching my mother, knowing she wanted to be a writer, not following that, becoming a secretary. And I think it's really important because the things your parents tell you have such an impact. And the fact that my mother's father would have said when she was a little girl, you're going to be a secretary, and that's what she became, despite her dreams. So it was a legacy in a way that I had to deal with when I wanted to become a writer, because I thought, frankly, it was impossible. It's impossible because I'd seen my mother do it. I'd seen my mother work in this job she hated day in and day out. And I don't know, I think that's all I want to begin with, just the struggle and that legacy and how you sort of fight through that.
So the question is, what is your definition of work? My definition of work has changed throughout my life. In the beginning, work was something that you did because you had to make money. I started working when I was like 15 or something to help the family out and have a little bit of money to pay for my own things. But I feel as I've grown that work is about doing something that you have passion for, as well as getting paid for it. It's great to do something you love and also get paid for it. And I'll talk a little bit later about, because there's another question that might relate to that, so I won't say everything. But I feel that for my parents, next question is, how do you see work as opposed to your parents' understanding of work? My parents are deceased now. They're not here anymore. But when I was a child, I remember we left the Dominican Republic. I was little, though, but I remember growing up, there was a lot of mourning and loss because they left the Dominican Republic in a rush because a dictator had died. And I remember that one of the dictator's son had a factory in Tuckahoe, and my family worked in that factory. And they would wake up like at 5 in the morning to go there and work. This was a cold country, so work was like a place that was freezing. There was no plátanos around then because there were no Dominicans, okay? So there was like not a lot of food that they knew, a language they didn't understand. If they got lost, I would be the translator, my brother and I, to these adults that, my father had had a very powerful position and suddenly he was like just a regular guy here. So work to them here was a drudgery. It was something they had to do to make things be. But they really felt that America was this place of opportunity where you could be religiously diverse and accomplish your dreams. So they instilled that in us. that we would be able to do whatever we wanted to do, that it didn't matter what it was, that we would be able to accomplish it. And I took that with me. And, you know, now, the work I do now, which I'll talk about later, I love it. I wake up in the morning and I'm happy to go to this job that I'm doing right now, which I'll share later.
Well, I think ideally the definition of work is something as much as a cliche as you enjoy. That's in the ideal. But I believe work should be rewarding. It should be rewarding for the person who's engaged in it. And reward can take many aspects. It could be financial or spiritual or intellectual. But I think work should always be somehow rewarding to the individual who's exercising it. And another dimension could be that you feel that you're also contributing to the community or society, etc. How my parents saw work, my father, I think he hated it all his life. My mother was very energetic, but I also come from a culture where men are expected to be providers. So in a sense, if you work and you don't make a certain amount of money, you're looked upon suspiciously. I remember when I was an artist, because I was a photographer and and an activist, etc. When I used to do things for art's sake, or activism for art, and the first questions that would come from my aunt or my mother is, "Are you getting paid? Are you selling?" Or So I'm pretty blunt about my parents' understanding of work, and for a long time I thought it was unfortunate. Till I started winning all these prizes, then the whole perception changed. Having said that, I still love my parents. Don't misunderstand me. Okay, that's it.
There's a character in my novel, The Importance of Being Dangerous, named Yaqub, and he's part of this criminal conspiracy. And the way he's fond of using this expression in the book, we do what we do to do what we gotta do, which kind of doesn't make any sense at all. But he's kind of a funny character, and he thinks a little differently than maybe most people. But when I think about Yaqub saying that, and I think about the definition of work, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in what he's saying to describe a lot of what many of us labor through when we work. That is to say, it's like a job. We do what we got to do. But we don't necessarily find it rewarding. It isn't necessarily fulfilling. It's something we have to do because it gets us from here to there. And every day we want to get from here to as close to there as we possibly can, so we don't fall behind. So when I think of the definition of work that guides my life, I try to think in a little bit more idealistic way. I try to aspire to a different idea of work, and I think my parents did too, and I'm blessed that their hard work helped me get to an idea of work that may just be a tad beyond where they were able to get. And that is to see work as the hours in which you express your freedom as best you can. It's the hours that you spend when you are trying to express that sense of a free person. And nothing more embodies that idea of your own freedom than the hours you spend writing. And it is the hardest work that I know. It's really hard. If you have any desire to be a writer, just be prepared for hell, because it's lonely and you have lots of different thoughts coming at you. And most people's idea of work is that you are producing something, but a lot of times when you're writing, you're not producing anything. You're sitting around thinking. And people don't understand that. But it is still an expression of your freedom to be coming up with these ideas and to be caring enough about their expression that you get it right. And if you don't think you get it right, to go back and do it again. And so that's my idea of work, and it's close to my parents' idea of work, I think, except that it was harder for them to get there because they had many more constraints on their sense of freedom. They had many more people telling them, you can't do that, you're a black woman. Or they were telling it to themselves through things that they were imposing on themselves. So my father wanted to be a writer, and he tried very hard, and when I saw him writing, he seemed to be in the throes of the best of himself. But to tell you the truth, I think my mother was a much better writer. And yet she did not really want to be out there. She didn't want to present herself so publicly. She didn't want to put it in a book and present it to the world. And I was always sorry that she didn't do that. But I think that she got great enjoyment from her work because she was finally, as a psychologist, as a psychotherapist, in fact, able to break beyond people's low expectations of her and do something that felt like, hour by hour, she was expressing her freedom. And so she died a professionally very satisfied woman. And I have tried to do that with my work, so that even if it doesn't feel right, even if it doesn't go so well, even if I'm disappointed by people's reactions, or I just don't quite feel like I'm getting it, I am nevertheless engaged hour by hour in this experiment to express my free self.
I want to take a moment just to find out from the audience about what your parents or what your community has told you about work. A little feedback to the authors of what you came in here understanding about work and what it is to be a worker. No one has ever told you anything about their jobs. No parent has ever showed up with a bad day.
Hi, my name is Dana, and I know my father always told me that a job is something you do to make money, but a career is something that you love to do, and it's like your passion, and you can do it in other places around the world and not just where you are now. So.
Hi, my name is Rory, and something my parents have always told me about work is that work isn't really work if you love what you're doing. So that's pretty much what they've told me. My parents own a process serving agency, so they're president and vice president of their own company.
Is there anything your parents haven't told you, but that you've picked up from them by the way they walked in on a certain day, something overheard?
Hi, my name is Tashay. What I didn't learn from my parents is that you need connections to get to the job that you want.
Can I speak to that? I just want to say something about that because we live in a different age for writers. And I just said that being a writer is maybe the hardest work, at least I know of. I was a bike messenger one summer. That was really hard work. I think being a writer is just slightly harder than being a bike messenger. But, you do all this work as a writer, and you withstand all the criticism, you get over the slumps, you finally get it together, and you feel good about it. And then you realize there's this thing called the business of writing. And so your comment about connections reminds me a lot of the struggle that writers have after they've struggled to produce good work and try to find an agent and then a publisher and then hope that the publisher won't decide to listen too much to the bookstore about what's going to sell. And you realize how much of your work can be compromised by the need to have the right kinds of connections, the need to get the right kind of praise at the right time, how much luck seems to influence it all, that there isn't really a clear logic, there isn't really a clear reason for things, and it feels like you've taken this baby and tossed it into the world, and the world is not, a very good caregiver. So it's something to think about, because we now live in a world where writers can take much more control and don't have to have connections. They can publish their own work. And then it becomes a question of finding connections like good friends or good acquaintances who are good editors, who can read well and critique well and let you know, this is a problem, and here's what I might do with it. And you take that, and you don't get mad at them, and you thank them for the attention they gave in criticizing you, and you produce your own work, and you actually market it yourself, and you distribute it yourself, and all of a sudden the writer has become both an artist and a business person. But they didn't need connections. You rolled your eyes. Did that didn't work for you? You want the connections. You can still get an agent. You can still do. I'm just suggesting there's another way to do it now. Sorry, Sachet. Sorry.
Saïd, just about that, and something that David just said. I remember some of my friends. I have two Dominican friends who wrote novels, Angie Cruz and Nelly Rosario, and they went the MFA route, and they had an agent. And I knew, I was working at NYU and doing all that stuff, that an agent was not going to get me, because they want you to be producing for them. They make money and everything. So I knew that I had to find a small publishing company that was going to nurture me, and I had no connections and I had no agent. What ended up happening was I found this book called Yo Soy la Avon Lady, and it had won the Marmol Prize. And when I read that book, in the back it had a mission statement, and I loved the mission statement. It was the only book that had a mission statement, like, this is my mission, And I said, I want to have my book published by them, because they're gonna, and I knew they only published 8 books, and that in order to get published, if I wanted to, I would have to win that prize. And I just sent them a nice letter. I said, I read your website. I love everything in your website. I love your mission statement. And they said, why don't you send your manuscript? And I did. And then they say, why don't you put it into the Marmol Prize? And I did. And I lost the first time, and I made finalists, but lost. I lost the second time, and I ended up winning the third time. Every year I had it already edited to send it again. Edit it to send it again. Because I was determined, because I knew I had no connections at all. And that I was all by myself. I was my own agent, my own marketing person. I'm my own marketer right now. And, but, I've met just wonderful people like Stacy. They always invite me to events. I mean, I've been really fortunate. I feel blessed every minute.
Hi, my name is Robert, and my mom, she used to be a secretary, and every time she would come home, she'll be like, she'll start mumbling about how work is hell, and that how she hates her boss, and that she wants to quit. And she went to the hospital because it was too much stress for her. So what I noticed is that she didn't go to college. She completed it, but she completed it after that job, but she didn't go to college at the time. And I noticed that if you want to have a job that it's not going to be it's not going to be too much stress for you and that you like, you have to go to school.
I can speak to that. I don't have a college degree. It's not necessarily true that you have to have one. I went to college for a few years, and then I ended up dropping out because I knew I wanted to be a writer. And how many people here want to be writers or artists of some... Not everybody? Okay. I don't think there's any one way to do anything. Contacts help. They don't hurt, but if you don't have them, it doesn't mean you can't do it. If you don't have a college degree, it doesn't mean you can't do it. A few years ago, when I was thinking about writing my memoir about my bad childhood, I didn't have an agent. I talked to an agent. She said, no. She said, I grew up, my parents were communists. She said, no, she said, they're not interested in books about communist childhoods. And I said, oh, thank you so much for saying that. Okay, good, so I won't waste my time writing it. And, well, here it is. So if someone at any point says to you no or bad idea, you thank them and you move on.
Yeah, I just want to respond to the question and what Robert said, which is just to say that I like Toni Morrison's, comment that in order to write, you have to earn a living. And so I think, or to do anything, you have to earn a living, and we are a school, so we're really encouraging our students to go to college and pursue careers, as all the writers on the panel, you'll notice, have careers where they're able to earn money and then can pursue whatever their dreams are. So that's our hope for our students.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I work in a college, so I want to, and my focus is retention and keeping students in college. So I do want to say, for some people, you may not need a degree, but get it, please, and then do whatever you want with it, but it really helps, and I do encourage it too. I think college is for everyone, and if everybody could stay put and do it, that's what my focus in the job that I have right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, college just was an eye-opener to me. But on writing, I always I worked in a bank at one point, and I hated it. It drained me. It drained my mind. It drained me physically, and I would go home. I was very tired, and it was so hard because of the hierarchies. I think artists tend to have problems with hierarchies. I left the bank, and I decided never to work in a company again. I worked as a security guard for a short period of time till somebody stole my own bicycle from the premises, which is not a good impression. And then I worked in restaurants. I worked in I was a wedding photographer. That's another experience. Maybe one day I'll write about it. And I worked as a taxi. All these jobs I worked in parallel with my artistic life, because I always felt that I think they were not careers in a way, and you're not too invested in them, and at the same time you can go in and out, easy cash, but I always gave priority to my writing and to my photography. It's a risky thing. I'm very cautious to advise young people to do the same. There's a risk in this, because you might end up at the end just hopping from one career to another and not being able to publish anything or produce anything as an artist. There's a risk, so there's a big risk. I did take it, and I remember being 35 at one point and looking at my life, not having accomplished anything, and driving a cab at the time, and this feeling of tremendous regrets came over me. Somehow I cornered myself, but I kept on doing it, and I wrote a book that had some success, to say the least. But I say it's if you want to take that route, you have to wait it, and you have to know that there is a possibility that you will never accomplish what you meant to do. So it's a big risk.
I would like to ask about favorite jobs, first jobs, most knowledgeable jobs from you guys, but I would also actually like to find out from our audience, what is your dream job? Anybody already have like a dream career or dream job in mind already?
Hi, I'm Deanna, and my dream job is to be a culinary artist.
Ooh, nice.
Hold on a second.
Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I would want to be a Supreme Court Justice.
Ooh, nice.
Hi, my name is Carmen, and I either wanted to be a lawyer, psychiatrist, or a journalist.
Oh,
My name is Noah Azadeh. I'm going to go to the Marines.
Joras Pichardo, and I want to be a musician.
Nobody here wants to play for the Yankees? You do, okay.
Wait, what position?
Shortstop.
Center field? Okay.
My name is Mark, and
Where are you? Oh, okay.
and my dream jobs are either a computer technician or a ski patrol, well, a snowboarder patrol.
Check it out.
Dude.
Right.
My name is Ian, and I want to be a musician. Yeah.
I guess now on to your anecdotes of jobs past. I'm sorry, could you set us
Yeah,
up?
all right, here's my dream job.
Oh, dream jobs?
I'll just start with first job, favorite job. I'll tell you what my dream job was, to be an actor. And you know what happened? When you have a name like I do, guess what roles I was being called in for? Anybody have anybody want to guess? So what? Terrorist? Okay. One. Huh? No, not communist. Oh, wait, communist? Communist. No, not communist. You go. Taxi driver. Nice. Okay. Any more? All right. Well, here's. You know Bill Cosby, right? And he used to have the show Cosby. And so I got called in for the audition, and the role was for homeowner. I was supposed to be the character that comes to look at Bill Cosby's house. And when I went in, the casting director said, "Well, you're not quite the homeowner type, but we do have deli owner." And I did the audition with a Middle Eastern accent, and I got the role, and I made more money in about 3 seconds on TV than I had made ever. And then I also thought, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't what I want to do. If this is what it's going to be, so that's my dream job and my favorite job, and then I had to let it go.
My first job, I'm sure all of you have worked in a store, like I worked in Bang Bang. It was a fashion store. And, you know, to tell you the truth, I didn't like it. I didn't like saying, may I help you, but it paid, you know, it gave me money. So I felt very fortunate to have the job. But what I wanted to do back then was I wanted to be a secretary and own the reception area and own the phone and organized everything. Plus, back then, the receptionist position would pay me $15 an hour. And I eventually did that, and that got me through school. But, and so I had all sorts of odd jobs. But my favorite job is my job right now. I'm the director of a counseling center at a college. I like being in a college, but I don't want to be a professor, because to be a professor at my level requires that I do research and that I write grants and that I write articles in order to keep my job. And then if I do that, I can't write fiction. So I had to give up that job because I couldn't do both professional writing and research and also do fiction writing. But now in my job as a director, I could write when I want, I could write article if I want, I could do research if I want, I could write grants if I want, because it's open to me. I could do it if I want to. It's not forced by me. And what I do at the college is I see students like yourselves who may be struggling with stress, or you may be anxious about college because it's your first year, or you're graduating and you're afraid of the economy. So I help students with mental health issues that they may have that's affecting their staying in college. And my focus is to help them stay in college and complete their education. And so I love that. And I do groups and workshops, and I do a lot of creative things. The job that taught me the most actually was, I was the director of a trauma center, and I work with child abuse. And working with child abuse was probably one of the most difficult experiences. I did it for 10 years. But the good thing about that job was that it was on an estate in Westchester, and I had a house. The job came with a house. A little house down, a 200-year-old house down a little peach orchard near a little pond. It was like idyllic. And it's not far, it was in Yonkers. I learned a lot there. I had to go to court, and I had to do a lot of things, and it just taught me how to be really strong and how to stay put despite difficult situations and experiences, because when I would go to court, I would be really nervous, and I had to stay calm in order to be able to fight for the rights of children. So I learned to be able to be calm despite being really anxious, and you could do it. Sometimes you think, well, I'm anxious, I'm not going to do that. It's not true. You could do anything despite anxiety, and I think that taught me a lot.
Yeah, well, my first job, like I said, it was on Flatbush Avenue. I worked for a friend of my father. He was a Jewish Lebanese who my father knew back home, and when I was looking for a job here, my father said, go and he'll hire you. And he did, and we used to sell, the store was a gift store, so a lot of porcelain stuff, elephants, I think. But the thing that when I first got there that kind of freaked me out was that there was a photo of a winking Jesus. You look and he winks at you. And for the first week, I didn't know if I was, chosen to be a saint or that was actually a trick in the photo. So it really freaked me out, and at the time I was a devout Catholic. I left from a Catholic background. Till one day, a customer said to me, "How much is that winking Jesus?" And the relief was immense. And then I work in restaurants, I work in warehouses. This is all my jobs in New York, and in restaurants I kept on spilling coffee on people, so they fired me. I wasn't good at it. Yeah, and I'm trying to answer the questions here, keeping with the script. My favorite job is when I was a wedding photographer. It was hard work, but the food was great. The women were all dressed up. And the music was good, and I got to experience, especially in Montreal, it's a very multicultural, vibrant city, so I got to experience all kind of weddings, from Chinese to Indians to Jewish, etc. I've done them all, and it kind of taught me, because you're in the background, you're not just at the party, you go, you meet the bride, and you see the family, how their interaction under stress, and an interesting day, and the gossip of the makeup artist and the coiffeur, and it's like a whole micro world that you experience, and you're always inside but outside. You're always an observant, especially because you're a photographer, so you have to be an observant somehow, and that position of being an observant, I think, and being situated at certain proximity from your subject, I think it translated into my writing. I can only write in the first person, and when I start a scene, I always position myself as if I'm a photographer and observing. That's why my writing, I think, becomes a bit more visual, the job that taught me the most, I think taxi driving was amazing too. There's a psychology in taxi driving. It was hard first, till I knew how to put people at ease. If it's a woman, I used to talk about my girlfriend, so the whole, because women are nervous when you're at night with somebody who's taking you, or I made up a family with a kid, so just to break the, and if it's I think mostly also you have to assure the public that you're not taking them on the longest route. That was harder a bit. There's always this suspicion about taxi driver that they're gonna charge you more. So anyway, here it is.
So my first job was working part-time. I had a lot of jobs. My first job where I got a paycheck, where they took out taxes and things, was when I was working on a crew of other teenage boys. We had all just gotten our working papers, so we were 14, and we got a little job on 135th Street off 8th Avenue. There was a broken down, decrepit, abandoned lot full of rats and glass and weeds and garbage and tires. And it was our job to clean it up and turn it into a vegetable garden. That was my first job. That was not my favorite job. My favorite job, even though I complain about it a lot, is probably my current job. But it could be, you know, I too was a musician. I forgot about that until you reminded me. And when I was a teenager, I was in a band, and we were a pretty serious band, and we could make a little money playing different kinds of events. And I think that might have been the most fun that I've ever had in a job. And working with those guys and just learning how to be a band and cooperate and make something beautiful. The job that taught me the most, another tough one because I got a few I could think of, but I think the one that taught me the most was the one, you know, sometimes you learn the most about yourself and a career from learning about what you really don't like. And so I worked when I got out of law school, or a year after I got out of law school, I worked for a law firm. And I think that was the job that taught me the most. And it was a big-time law firm a few blocks from here. And, you know, this was really the big time. These were really, you know, folks like you see on TV. And they were all very smart. And they worked extremely hard. And they were almost to a person psychotic. I mean, they were just some of the craziest personalities you've ever been around. They were like people who'd been locked in a cave for decades and just didn't know how to socialize. And they were very demanding. And I remember one day a secretary had a heart attack. And she happened to be a floater, you know, somebody who moves from different attorneys around, doesn't have a designated attorney. And she was my attorney, my secretary that day, and I was a very young attorney. And she had this heart attack, and so she is literally lying out in the corridor, and all the other secretaries have come to help her out. And attorneys come out, I'm standing there, I'm horrified, you know. It seems like she's stable. The fire department is on the way, you know, the fire department always comes first. And it seems like she's stable, and a couple of attorneys, people much more senior than me, came out to make sure that she wasn't going to die. And once it was clear that she was probably having a heart attack, but it probably wasn't life-threatening, do you know they went back to their work? I mean, it was almost like stepping over the body. And she did survive. And shortly after that, I had finished some major piece of a case with this attorney who supervised me, who was driving me crazy and worked me all night long for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we were having a glass of wine on Friday night, and I made the biggest mistake. I told him that I had just gotten a contract for my first book, The Monkey Suit, which is short stories. And all the fun and all the sense of celebration and all the relief over what we had accomplished immediately vanished from the room. It was as if I had just confessed to a murder. And this guy stopped, and he said to me, "You what? You want to be a writer? Let me tell you something. If you want to be a lawyer, you be a lawyer. You want to be a writer, you be a writer. But you can't do both." Now here is a man who was a very good lawyer, but he is nobody's writer. So it didn't make him an expert on the subject. But it did teach me that this was not the environment for me. And it also taught me, and I teach it to myself every day, how wrong that guy was. But it's a challenge to try to figure out how you're going to integrate two parts of your life. And not every job will help you do that. Some jobs will fight your work as a writer, and other jobs help to develop your work as a writer. And then there are a whole bunch in between, and that's on you. So,
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think when he said that to you, it was because he had a dream that he didn't ever go for, and he didn't want to see you doing that?
you know, I think some people have that. I don't think he had that. I think his particular sort of anal personality was such that he thought there was one way to do law well. And he was so incredibly driven. And, you know, sick parents and sick babies at home, and, you know, if you were sick, things like that didn't work for him. He didn't care. You know, it was, this is what we must do. And he was driven in this way that is not uncommon among those personalities. But I think you're right. I don't think in his case it happened to be the case, but I think that many people are acting out of their sense of lost dreams, and how dare you attempt to work that balance that I had to
Actually,
let go.
can I just, Stacey, can I give a question to these guys? I know it's going a little off.
Actually, we're going to go to Q&A, so let's start off the Q&A with the audience with your question.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys. So, Snowboarder Patrol, question, not just for you, but for, so has anybody here said to an adult, hey, this is what I want to do when I grow up, and they've told you, oh, you can't do that? Yeah. Ah, interesting. Okay. What do you say back to them? Did you say anything back? What did you say?
I said, when I get that money, you're not going to get them.
Like, what was the book that you read, or what was the situation that you were in that you were just like, no, I'm gonna go this way? Like, can you tell a little bit about that?
You know, for me, when I was like 15, I would read in English and Spanish, and I read a book. It was written by a Spaniard, and it was about an adolescent girl, and she would record her life history. It was called Diario de Ana Maria, something like that. And I was in her world every day as she read that. And then, you know, I also later on read the Diary of Anne Frank. And it was like, wow, you know, to be able to, you know, to be in the lives of these individuals and feel like I was there. I wanted that too. I wanted to be able to do that. But you know, when I was 16 or 17, I was living in the Bronx. Nobody wrote about a girl like me, or about a girl like me living in the Bronx, wanting things that I wanted. I would have to read other people, and I so much hunger to read about a girl like me in the Bronx, walking on the Grand Concourse and stuff like that. And I would always say, one day I'm going to write a book, and the girl's going to be an adolescent. She's going to be walking on Grand Concourse. And, you know, I also it didn't have to be anything profound. It could be about choosing something. I have a story about the girls fighting over the adolescent girl wants these hot-looking red shoes, and the mother's like, no, the mother's really traditional. So I wanted to write stories about wanting things, about relationships between women and others, about adolescent girls, Latina girls, and girls that were Dominican living in the Bronx, because I had not read those stories. So that, reading her,
It was almost like the presence and the absence.
yeah, that's a good point.
This is a question to Saïd, right?
Freaky.
This book is about your life, right?
Yes, yeah.
So where did you come up with the title of Skateboards?
Are you asking because are you a skateboarder?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So I grew up communist, which meant that we believed, my mother and I, that there was going to be a revolution in the country. And we didn't have much money, my mother and I. And when I was 8 years old, I asked her to buy me a skateboard. And we went to the department store, and there was a big bin of skateboards, and she said, there was a sign that said $10.99. And I said, I want the green one. And she said, well, we can't afford it, but when the revolution comes, everybody will have a skateboard, because all skateboards will be free. Oh. How many people here skateboard? Uh-huh. All right.
I used to.
Even without the revolution.
I have a question here. I'm sorry, I don't know where the mic is.
Hi. As a teacher, we strive to help our students to develop discipline in their lives. So could you guys, whoever wants to speak to how you've developed your discipline routines that help you balance? And do you have routines? I mean, is that a part of what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think creativity by itself is not enough. I do have routine, and when I'm writing, I write every day. It's work. Nothing can be accomplished without some regiment work. I wake up when I write. I usually tend to sleep very early, and I wake up very early. So I start writing around 5:30. I have a cup of coffee by 12. I'm done, but I'm exhausted, so I eat and I kind of sleep. I was fortunate at the time when I wrote my first book. I was doing wedding photography. That was the only thing I was doing, which is seasonal and only on the weekends. So I had 5 days to write, and I did write, and I wrote every day. It's crucial. I think it's crucial, and some writer would say they would wait for inspiration. I used to think that way, but now the more I write, the more I think you have to actually sit down and force yourself to do it. You have to work. It doesn't. It's a serious endeavor. It's a very serious one, and it's very demanding. It's very demanding also because you can't separate your private life from your work. You're always thinking. You're always, so in a way you never take a break. So it's very consuming. But hopefully it's rewarding. Even if you don't get published, it's rewarding. I meet more and more people who tell me that they do write, but they don't want to publish, and I admire them so much. And I think there must be much better books than mine written by these people. I think someday a huge library like a Borges type of library should be gathered of all these people who never want to be published.
Can I say something to that? That's a great question, and I think Rawi just nailed it. I would add to it that I agree. Everyone's different. I agree that you don't wait for inspiration, but you don't squander it either. So you really have to set aside very specific blocks of time, and you have to know yourself in terms of how much distraction you can manage, and you have to fight to free yourself from the distraction, and you sometimes have to piss off the people in your life so you can carve out that sort of creative, I don't quite want to call it a sanctuary because it's often a struggle in there, but you need that space. And I say you don't squander the inspiration, which is only to say that if you are inspired, you want to make sure to take those notes. You don't want to lose it, because there's no worse feeling than the sense that, wow, this finally came to me, and then I went and I got that cup of coffee, and I took that phone call, and I checked those emails, and it's gone. But there's a beautiful book, back to the previous question, that you all might want to look at if you haven't already. It was introduced to me when I was not much older than you, called Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. And Rainer Maria Rilke was an Austrian poet and novelist who wrote in the 19s and I guess died in 26. And a very young man, an accomplished writer, but who was asked in a series of letters by a stranger, a poet, a young poet, about the writing process and about life. And it's this beautiful book and the exchange of letters between this guy and Rainer Maria Rilke. And Rilke says some of the most beautiful things about the discipline, about structuring writing, about thinking, about the tasks, and also just about, growing up, being a young person, coping with stuff and how you put all that together. So it's and the whole thing's like 100 pages. I mean, you can put it in your back pocket. It's really nice.
We're going to end, oh, go ahead, Annecy, you're going to get the last word, yes.
About that, I just want to say that since I work full-time, I have to be at work at 9 and be back home at 5. I have a family and stuff like that. And what I do is I try to carry my notebook with me, my little notebook that I could write all the time. And there are moments and pockets of moments when you see beautiful things in the world and you want to kind of write them down. Or the way that you're all dressed now, 10 years from now, you won't be dressed this way. There will be another fashion. So you want to document what people are wearing right now. And then you go back to your notebooks and you see things that you've written that you could draw from and create stories or create poems. So it's not only about sitting, you know, I wake up early. Once a writer said to me, a professor said, he was a teacher, a workshop, he said, you know, to be a writer is very difficult. You have to wake up at 4 in the morning, and he made it really intense. And I was like, God, I don't, you know, is it really like that? Is it going to be that horrible? But, you know, now that I work full time, sometimes I do have to wake up early in the morning. I don't do it all the time. If not, I wouldn't be able to do my work. But I find that I wake up early, I write for an hour, or I do my meditation and my yoga, and then I move on to whatever I have to do. But the daily writing, the pockets, the moments that are like photography, that are so beautiful, or things people say, those are the things that I record for later use.
At this time, I'd like to invite you all, first of all, to give a round of applause to our wonderful presenters. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your wisdom.